it is an experimental laboratory.
Perception of media being something, it's safer to avoid this.
All the newspapers throughout the country should raise their voice, come up with some sort of specific demands with the government.
A combination of all these sources, revenue model is probably that's sustainable.
Many of the bigger established newspapers have firewalls right now.
Hopefully we will be able to get some money so that we can share whatever comes in.
Welcome to the webinar, everyone. This is our fourth webinar in our series of Let Down in Lockdown. We've done a few webinars in the past, and you will find a summary that has been posted in the chat box. It will take you to our NWMI page, which has a summary of all our past webinars, as well as about the entire initiative that we started back in April. We started with, two of our members, Durga Nandini and Raksha Kumar, opening their DMs to journalists who were, anxious, stressed after rumors of job losses, as well as, job losses that had already taken place at some news organizations back then. We also collated mental health resources for anybody who was interested and who needed that kind of help. This was because Durga Nandini and Raksha Kumar were getting a lot of messages from people who were under a lot of stress. And after that, we also started our jobs thread. This is being curated again by Durga Nandini and Raksha Kumar. Anybody who's not familiar with this can please go and check Raksha and Durga's timelines. We will also be posting the link to our jobs thread. And very quickly after that, we have done 3 webinars. Our objective has been to primarily offer the kind of help that journalists are looking towards. They want to know what are their legal rights. They want to know what they should do. So we tell them that there's a need to diversify, etc. We've had journalists who have had similar experiences in the past. So today, it's over to Geeta now. Today's discussion, as you all know, is about the struggles of smaller news organizations who are trying hard to keep the employees, to retain the employees and do the kind of work that they're doing. Over to you, Geeta. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really, we've had so much that we've discussed over the last few webinars, and it's really difficult to know where to begin, because we are seeing a very, very grim situation in terms of the media. This has been, many of us who worked with the media and who've been tracking the media have actually been seeing a lot of the kind of problems that the media is facing. There's been a lot of discussion already about the way in which the media has lost a lot of the trust that it had. There's been a lot of discussion about credibility issues. There's been a lot of discussion, not enough, but a fair amount of discussion about the mechanics of the media itself, the problems within print, the kind of issues that we are facing with broadcast media, for instance, and the kind of ratcheting of a lot of hate and very aggressive kind of journalism, which is very, very divisive. So there's been a lot of what we think of as the crises in the media. But this particular webinar is really not looking at the issue of content or issue of ethics, really. we generally think of the media as something that has bucked the worldwide trend, especially in India, the print media, with very high circulation for non-English media. I was looking at some of the figures for the Registrar of Newspapers, for instance, just before this, and the 2018 figures give us the registered publications of about over a lakh in India. And newspaper categories about 17,000, and periodicals are about a lakh and so. Um, but like I said, there's been a lot of the hollowness that we are seeing in the media in the last several years. Journalists have, of course, faced the brunt of it, and several media houses have closed down or suspended publication during this lockdown. Some have jettisoned print, they've transited to digital platforms, there have been news gathering budgets, which are already very low, which have shrunk even more. The space for freelance journalism has almost negligible. And I've already spoken about the trust. But the discussion is really not about the big fish in the media for today, especially today. There's one interesting piece of data which I found from the RNI website. It says that the number of new publications registered during 2017 and 18 was about 3,704. The number of seized publications, the publications that just collapsed or shut down for whatever reason, was about 285. This tells us that the desire to publish is still very strong in India. We need to understand really why and what this is. What is it that propels this kind of desire to keep bringing out, to keep registering new publications and bringing them out? But what we do know from the history of the press in India is that there are a number of very small, independent, very valiant newspapers and now, of course, the news sites that that keep trying to maintain that tradition of print and of independent media. So that was actually what concerned us when we put together this discussion for today. The fact that many of these publications have a tradition, and we have people here in the panel today who have a tradition of something like 40 years of publishing. They're very highly respected. They've struggled to maintain their integrity. They've struggled to fight off political pressures, economic pressures. And the concern for us is how they cope with this new normal, with the COVID crisis, with the precarity that we are already facing. So what does the future hold for these publications, for the journalists who work, and what kind of nurturing environment will we have for these independent media houses? With this preamble, I think I want to introduce our speakers. We have Anuradha Bhasin. She's the executive editor of Kashmir Times and a journalist with over 3 decades of experience in covering Jammu and Kashmir. Her, she already, everyone knows Kashmir Times for being the oldest English daily in Jammu and Kashmir. It's known for its immensely courageous and independent journalism practiced by its founder, Bhasin. Anuradha is a Commonwealth Fellow of 2016 and has worked on issues of human security. She was also a petitioner in the Supreme Court to challenge the ban on communication on August 4th, 2019, which has crippled the media in Kashmir. And she's been a trenchant critic of the new media policy in Kashmir. So welcome, Anuradha, to this webinar. We have Dr. Vasu, who's a medical graduate and a long-time activist, and he was a columnist with the Gauri Lankesh Patrike and an associate of Gauri Lankesh in Communal Harmony Forum. But he took on the responsibility of continuing the tradition that Gauri had started. He's the editor of Nyaya, Patha, which is a weekly tabloid, Nanna Gauri, a Kannada portal, and Gauri Lankesh News, an English portal. So welcome, Dr. Vasu. to our webinar.
Thank you.
I think you had expressed a desire that you will speak in Kannada. Nange ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ Kannada ಗೊತ್ತು, but it's not good enough to be able to bring in all that you say. So we do have Vasanthi Hariprakash who will be translating for us. We also have Sarfaraz Arzoo, who is again a journalist with more than 40 years of experience in journalism. He is the founder editor of Hindustan Urdu Daily. What is interesting about Sarfaraz Bhai is that he has worked on the transition from calligraphy to computers in Urdu, and has developed an indigenous software for the Urdu script and data transmission techniques for Urdu. So he has actually made that transition from calligraphy to Urdu, which is to computers, which I think must have been very, very difficult, but also very challenging and interesting. He's also the General Secretary of the All India Urdu Editors Conference, the Urdu Patrakar Sangh in Mumbai, and he's been involved with the Khilafat Committee and the Muslim Intellectual Forums. So again, welcome to you, Sarfaraz Bhai, for joining us here. Our last panelist is Pradip Phanjoubam, an old friend and currently the editor of the FPSJ Review of Arts and Politics. It's a web portal and a print periodical. He's been a columnist for The Telegraph, the New Indian Express, and has written extensively on the Northeast. He's also written two books, excellent books. One is The Northeast Question, Conflicts and Frontiers. The other is Shadows and Light, a kaleidoscope of Manipur. Pradip used to be the editor of Imphal Free Press. And the interesting thing about what the website says, Pradip, on your FPSJ website, says that it is a news portal based in Imphal, run and owned by employees who are a team of committed media workers. So that's about the first time that I've seen something like this. And waiting to hear from you about how exactly this portal works. And so I think today we'll start with Anuradha, and we'd like to hear from you, Anuradha, on what you think are the challenges, what do you feel has brought you to feel a sense of despair that I saw on your Twitter timeline a couple of days ago. So if you could just speak a little bit about it.
Mike, I come from Jammu and Kashmir, and our story really does not begin with COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened to media, there is a background, and the background is the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I won't much go into that, but something that is related of today and how we reached where we've reached. So much of, though there were challenges throughout, particularly in the last 3 decades, the 90s was particularly bad. But in recent, more than a decade, what the government has started doing, the state is doing, is to choke the finances of newspaper organizations. Because newspaper in a place like Jammu and Kashmir, where there is very little corporate business, the economy is, okay, it's the economic indices have been better than many other places, but they're not in terms of advertising. It's not such a big market. So the reliance has always been on the government ads, the central government ads and the state government ads. And the control started, the state government ads are, there's never been a very rationalized policy. So there's been whimsical distribution of advertisements. Whereas the DAVP ads, which were more paying, those started being stopped for several newspapers, particularly ours. We lost DAVP ads in 2010, and which was banned after the Home Ministry sent a letter to the DAVP. It wasn't even the the INB ministry, it was a home ministry saying nothing, that only that these, their ads should be stopped. And they'd done that for a few Kashmiri papers. But we had two editions, Jammu edition and a Srinagar edition, and we also had a Dogri newspaper and a Hindi newspaper. So they stopped the ads for all of these. So it has been a difficult journey ever since. In these last 10 years, we managed to survive by cutting down on the operation scale of operation. Our staff came down to 1/5 of what it was. Our circulation was hit. We couldn't invest in that. Our reliance on the state government ads increased because the share of the government ads and the private ads is 90% is government ads and 10% is just the private sector. So with that little a pool, we managed to survive. But what happened is that a lot of staffers left midway because we were unable to hike up salaries, pay salaries on time. One thing that I'd like to mention here is in India, all over India, we have a problem of, the cost of production of newspaper is very, very high, whereas the cost of the newspaper is much lower, and people will not pay for it if you hike it up phenomenally. For instance, I mean, a newspaper production, if you have to, it will cost you more than 10 or 12 rupees a day, depending on the size of the pages. And in areas like, Pradip might be facing something similar in Northeast or in Jammu, and expensive is 10% higher. So there is a huge gap between the cost of production and the cost of the newspaper that goes to the market. And to meet that, there is so much dependence on advertisements. Somewhere we felt that we needed to relook into our business model. But, there's been a constant battering because of the conflict. It's not just that they stop your ads. The state has wonderful, sophisticated ways of battering you always, keeping you involved in cases, sometimes a labor court, sometimes some defamation, something or the other, they just keep you involved so that at least one of our editors is perpetually sitting in the court, and we don't get time to actually think about how to move out of this crisis. And then the last 1 year has been particularly bad. The day I went to court, whatever little government ads we were receiving, the state government ads, they stopped that very day. For a while, they gave us a few ads sometime in October or November, and then they completely stopped. Through these years, couple of years back, we stopped we had to shut down our Dogri newspaper, the only language newspaper in Jammu region. And we had to also shut down our Hindi newspaper. We were managing going ahead with the English publication. But when COVID lockdown started, it was impossible to do so. The sense that, the hawkers weren't distributing the papers. We didn't have enough resources to carry on if the newspapers were not going to be circulated. There were no ads. There were not enough resources to ensure that the staffers, they could be safely kept inside, particularly the technical staff. You have to arrange for their stay at the printing press, which we've been doing through the conflict. We've seen curfew times and all these. So staffers stay, sometimes in Kashmir, they stay for a month at the press, and we have provisions and everything for them. But COVID was something different. You need to provide for their safety, for their hygiene, for their physical distancing, and all of this was impossible. So we shut down our print publications, we suspended it, and we hope to sometime revive it, but we're continuing with the online edition. The last 4 months have been particularly bad, and what saddens me is that we are unable to pay our employees. Many of them have left. Some of them continue to work, even though we've had a talk with them. We've asked them to look for alternatives. We are helping them look for alternatives because we're not very sure if we'll be able to survive. But I must say that, some of these staffers through this journey have been so committed, and they stood by us because they believed in the kind of journalism that the newspaper espoused.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so difficult to respond to all that you have shared with us. I think many of us are aware of so much that Kashmir Times has struggled with, but yes, today we are in a really much more grim situation than we've seen so far. I'd like to move to Vasu. If you could tell us how things have been after you've had to take over from after Gauri died, and you had to take over the publication, the entire publishing actually, which she left behind. So if you could just tell us, Vasu, how it's been.
Sure, thank you. And I'm sorry I'm unable to continue my talk in English. I can speak medicine in English, but not other things.
Not
okay. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ NWMI ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಹಿಂದಿನಿಂದ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಒಂದು ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕಲ್ಪಿಸಿಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಏನು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಅಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ವಾಸಂತಿ ಅವರೇ, ನಾನು ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ಲಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾ ಮಧ್ಯ?
But first let me introduce Vasanti to everyone. Vasanti is going to be doing the translation. Vasanti, thank you so much for joining this. Vasanti has been with Pickle Jar, and she does some amazing work. She's a woman with so many different parts. It's very difficult to be able to describe exactly who she is. She's also a radio jockey. Vasanti, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Geeta. Vasu already ನೀವು ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. I'm going to take my notes. In case I leave out anything, you can remind me later.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರ್ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳಿದ್ವಿ. ತುಂಬಾ ಆಸಕ್ತಿಕರವಾಗಿತ್ತು ಮತ್ತು ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರದ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಂದಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಶುರುವಾಗಿದ್ದಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಹಿಂದಿನಿಂದ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದು. ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಲಂಕೇಶ್ ಅವರು ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಂತ ಒಂದು ನಿಯಮ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಜಾಹೀರಾತನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ನೋ ಅಡ್ವರ್ಟೈಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅವತ್ತಿಂದ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು. ಹಂಗಾಗಿ ಓದುಗರು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹಣ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ, ಎಷ್ಟು ದರ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ರದ್ದೊಂದು ನಿಯಮ ಇತ್ತು. ಅದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಮಸಾಲೆ ದೋಸೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾಫಿ ಸೇರಿದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಹಣ ಆಗುತ್ತೋ ಅಷ್ಟನ್ನ ಒಂದು ವೀಕ್ಲಿ ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ಗೆ ಓದುಗರು ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಲಂಕೇಶ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ರು. ಹಂಗೆ ಆ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ಅವರು ಬಹಳ ಲಾಭದಾಯಕವಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದ್ರು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಮಸಾಲೆ ದೋಸೆ ಮತ್ತು ಕಾಫಿ ಬೆಲೆ ಸುಮಾರು 40-50 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಇದೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಈ ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ಗಳ ಬೆಲೆ 15-20 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಮಾತ್ರನೇ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ನಾವೀಗ ತರ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಅದು ಈ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಬಹುಶಃ ಈ ಕಡೆ ಗೌರಿ ಲಂಕೇಶ್ವರ ಫೋಟೋ ಕಾಣ್ಬೋದು, ನ್ಯಾಯ ಪಥ ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಹೆಸರಿನಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಇದು ಈ ವಾರದ ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್. ನಮ್ಮ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ, nanugauri.com ಕನ್ನಡ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ ಮತ್ತು gaurilankesh.com ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್, ಅದರ ಲಿಂಕ್ಸ್ ನಾನು ಚಾಟ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಈಗ ನಾವು ಈ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆ ನಿಮ್ ಮುಂದೆ ತೋರಿಸ್ದೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಲಾಕ್ಡೌನ್ ಆದಾಗ ನಾವು ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ನಿಲ್ಸಿದ್ವಿ ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದರ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಕೂಡ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇತ್ತು. ಇನ್ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಈ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಈ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಲಾಕ್ಡೌನ್ಗಿಂತ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಹಿಂದೆನೆ ಶುರು ಆಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತು. ಈ ಸದ್ಯ ನಾವು ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬರ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಆಧರಿಸಿದೀವಿ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಹಿಂದೆ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಸಿಗ್ನಿಫಿಕೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂ ಅನ್ನ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗೆ ತಂದ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಒಂದ್ ಹಂತ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಆಗಿದ್ದ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಸ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಇಡೀ ರಾಜ್ಯದೊಳಗಡೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಬಸ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ ನ ಇಡುವಂತ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದರದ್ದು ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಬಾಡಿಗೆಯ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಒಂದೇ ಕಡೆ ಸುಮಾರು 4,000-5,000 ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾರಾಟ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಗಳೇನಿದ್ವು ಅದೇನೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾರ್ಡ್ಲಿ 1,000 ಮಾತ್ರ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾರಾಟ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಬುಕ್ ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಸ್ ಇರೋದು. ಸೊ ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಎಕಾನಮಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಹೊಡೆತವನ್ನ ಹಿಂದಿಂದ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ರೂಪದ ಒಂದು ಮಾಧ್ಯಮ ಆಗಿ ಉಳಿದಿಲ್ಲ. ಈ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಗೌರಿ ಲಂಕೇಶ್ವರಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ್ಲೇನೆ ಇತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮೊಳಗಡೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿನೇ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ಸ್ ನ ವೆಬ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ ನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಬಟ್ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರ ಹತ್ಯೆ ಆದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಯನ್ನ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕಾಲ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸಲೇಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ತರ ಹಠಕ್ಕೂ ಬಿದ್ದು ಮತ್ತು ವೆಬ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ ಕೂಡ ನಡೆಸಕ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದು ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸಾರಿ ಗೀತಾ ಅವ್ರೆ, ನೀವೇನು ಹೇಳೋದು?
No, shall we translate that much? So
yeah. Yes.
Okay, namaskara to everybody, and I have already put out a disclaimer that I would be translating Dr. Vasu, what he says. However, in case there's something left out, he himself is going to help me. So he first started by saying he has a lot of appreciation for the work that NWMI does, and he had already heard much. And today to be on this platform gives him happiness. He said that he heard Anuradha, what she spoke about Kashmir Times, and the fact that even they, that is Lankesh Patrike, has COVID is not the starting point for our troubles, is what Dr. Vasu said. He started by mentioning the founder, Mr. Lankesh, who is iconic, especially in Karnataka media. He said that it started with a few principles that Lankesh used to be very particular about. One is that there would be no advertisements, no jahiratu, they're not at the mercy of the government advertisements for sure, and that the reader would have to pay. So much so that he had a lot of clarity on what the reader ought to pay, and his mantra was that whatever you pay for a masala dosa and coffee. But Dr. Vasu says that now what we see is that the prices of masala dosa and coffee itself has gone so high that it would probably take you some 50 rupees, whereas the cost of the newspaper clearly hasn't spiraled that much. He had a reputation for running Lankesh Patrike profitably, and also that he's going to be sharing the links of nammagauri.com, and the kind of distribution difficulties that they are now facing is something that he would like to place on record. Earlier now they depend a lot on subscribers, but there was a time when earlier sales on newspaper stands used to contribute to the revenue substantially. He says that nowadays, even in the bus stands, the tradition of keeping newspapers or tabloids is disappearing more due to the rent issues, because it really costs a lot for a newspaper to be displayed there. He put out some bit of data, said that there used to be 5,000 of these in Bengaluru anta helidra, Karnatakadalli anta helidra Vasu?
ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಒಂದೇ ಕಡೆ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಮಾರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದವರು 5,000 ಇತ್ತು ಸ್ಟಾಲ್ಗಳು, ಈಗ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿದೆ, 1,000.
So the number of stalls in a city like Bangalore alone used to be 5,000, and now there are only 1,000 book-stalls. So there's a huge drop in that. So being a tabloid is really not a very sustainable option for a news publication. They have tried to go the portal way, and especially after Gauri Lankesh's death, it's not been very easy, but the struggle is on, and they are now trying to establish those portals.
Yes. So next part I'll be very brief. ಬಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ವೆಬ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಬಂದ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿತ್ತು. ಒಂದು ಆಡ್ಸ್ ತಗೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ ವೆಬ್ಗೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಗೂಗಲ್ ಆಡ್ಸ್ ಟಿಲ್ ವೆರಿ ರೀಸೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅವೈಲಬಲ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕನ್ನಡ. ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಲಾಕ್ಡೌನ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಗೂಗಲ್ ಓಪನ್ಡ್ ಅಪ್ ದಿಸ್ ಆಡ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕನ್ನಡ ವೆಬ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್, ಅಂಡ್ ವಿ ಅಪ್ಲೈಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ಇಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ವಿ ಗಾಟ್ ಇಟ್. ಎರಡನೇದು ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಹಸ್ ಬೀನ್ ಹಾಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿ ವೆರಿ ಬಿಗಿನಿಂಗ್. In fact, 15 back, ನಮ್ಮ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಪೇಜ್, ನಮ್ಮ ವೆಬ್ಸೈಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಟೋಟಲಿ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಟೆಕ್ನಿಕಲ್ ರೀಸನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಬಟ್ ಬೇಸಿಕಲಿ ಸಿನ್ಸ್ ವಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ exposing some of the scams of Karnataka ruling party MLAs, it started only after that. ಬಟ್ ಈಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ 1 year ಇಂದ ಕೂಡ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು, ವಿಡ್ರಾ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಈ ತರದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಡ್ ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂ ಬರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ವೆಬ್ ಪೋರ್ಟಲ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಈ ತರದ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ ಸುತ್ತ ಇರುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಒಟ್ಟು ವಾತಾವರಣ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದೇನೆ ಹಾಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಗೌರಿ ಲಂಕೇಶ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಹೆಸರಿನ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಬ್ಲಾಕೇಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋಂತ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ನಮ್ಗಿದೆ. ಅದಾಯ್ತು. ಬಟ್ ಇನ್ ಸ್ಪೈಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ ದಿಸ್ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಈ ಲಾಕ್ಡೌನ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಯಾರನ್ನಾದ್ರೂ ಕೆಲಸದಿಂದ ತೆಗೆಯೋದಲ್ಲ, ನಾವು ವಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ಹೈರಿಂಗ್ ಮೋರ್. ನಾವು ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಇಬ್ಬರನ್ನ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ತಗೊಂಡ್ವಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಷ್ಟನೇ ಇತ್ತು ಈ ಅವಧಿಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಸೇಲ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಹೊಸ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಶುರುವಾಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ರತಿ ತಿಂಗಳು ಹೊಸ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ ಎಷ್ಟಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಹೌಸ್ ನ ರನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಂತ ಒಂದು ಇದಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕ್ರೌಡ್ ಫಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಇದನ್ನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಬಂತು. ಸೊ ಮಿಲಾಪ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ನಾವು ಆ ಕ್ರೌಡ್ ಫಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಇದನ್ನ ರೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಸಿಕ್ತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಆ ತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಹೌಸ್ ನ ಒಂದು ಕಾಸ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ರೀಡರ್ಸ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬರ್ಸ್ ರಿಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಹಣಕಾಸು ಬರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರುವಾಯಿತು. ಇದಲ್ಲದೆ ನಾವೊಂದು ಸ್ಟಡಿನ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಲಾಕ್ ಡೌನ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ಡ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್ ವರ್ಕರ್ಸ್ ಇವರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಗುರಿಯಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟಡಿನ ಅಜಿಂ ಪ್ರೇಮ್ಜಿ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಅದು ನಮ್ಗೊಂದಷ್ಟು ರೆವಿನ್ಯೂನ ತಂದ್ಕೊಡ್ತು. ಬರೀ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ವರ್ಕ್ ಅಷ್ಟೇನೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಹೌಸ್ ನ ಸಸ್ಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಈ ತರದ್ ಬೇರೆ ಇನ್ನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಗೂಗಲ್ ಅವರ ಗೂಗಲ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇನಿಷಿಯೇಟಿವ್ ನಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಜರ್ನಲಿಸಂ ಎಮರ್ಜೆನ್ಸಿ ರಿಲೀಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಅಂತ ಏನೋ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಇನ್ನೂ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಹಣ, ಬಟ್ ದೇ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅಪ್ರೂವ್ಡ್ ಅವರ್ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್. ಈ ತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಜರ್ನಲಿಸಂ ನಿಂದಾನೆ ಪರ್ಸೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಹೌಸ್ ಇಂದಾನೆ ಆಡ್ಸ್ ಇಂದಾನೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಸಸ್ಟೈನ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಇವೆಲ್ಲದಿಂದ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವ್ ಇನ್ನೂ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋಂತ ಇದ್ರೊಳಗಡೆನೆ ಸದ್ಯಕ್ಕಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇದು ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Yes, so he said that Google ads were not available. I mean, the other kind of challenges that they faced in this particular phase. And as far as Facebook was concerned, it was openly hostile. Their website has been blocked. I mean, not a surprise, because they also started covering stories on Karnataka ruling party MLA. So the timing was very revealing. Also, that the ad revenue portals, maybe because of Gauri Lankesh association, that they could not really leverage that much. Dr. Vasu says that at a time when people were laying off their employees, they have gone ahead and hired. There are now 2 new people on their team. And they went in for Milap crowdfunding because it was not very sustainable for them to actually have their, because of all the reasons that he put out. New subscriptions were not happening. So what he essentially said was that it was not possible to sustain media work alone, and therefore they have taken up other means, which is also to do a study and survey on the impact on the unorganized sector. And this they did it with the collaboration of Azim Premji University and the Center for Sustainable Employment. Meanwhile, Google came up with an emergency fund. I think that's what I heard you say. The funds have not yet come, but certainly, you know, their application has been approved, and they now wish to expand.
Google has a Google News initiative that they've started actually.
Yeah, and
I'll ask Sarfaraz bhai if you can.
Yeah.
Sarfaraz bhai, if you could tell us what your experience has been.
Well,
sure.
I was under the impression that you'll follow the north, south, east, west matrix. Get Pradip first and me in the end. But in any case, whatever Anuradha ji has said about Kashmir is just a microscopic version of what is going on in the whole of the country. Our story is not very different. What has actually happened is that even according to the statistics provided by newspaper societies and all, the Indian media, the print industry has gone back by around 4,000 crore rupees in these last 4 months. And the projections are that before anything gets better, if at all it gets better, these figures could rise to around 16,000 crore rupees for the industry, for the print industry. And I think this is a huge figure. And where we are looking for some sort of assurance is that the government should come forward and provide some sort of relief to the newspaper industry. But what is happening is actually the opposite of it. Uh, uh, Anuradha ji would, I mean, realize that the DAP spend on advertisements has gone down to 1/3 of what it was around 2 years ago. It wasn't a huge figure even at that time. It was around 600 crores per annum. It has gone down to 200 crores last year. And in these 4 months of this fiscal, uh, the spend is only 1/4 of what it should have been. So the the idea of choking the industry is not restricted to Kashmir alone. And we were of the opinion that probably we being Urdu newspapers, probably our budgets are being curtailed and all that. But what we have realized is that this curtailment has been across the board. The Gujarati newspapers, the Hindi newspapers, the Marathi newspapers, they've all suffered from these cutbacks. So the situation is very, very bad actually. And what we were expecting and what everybody else was expecting that the government would step in by providing relief in form of GST cuts and import duty cuts and increasing of advertising revenue and all those things. None of these things are coming forth. And what is being seen is that the newspaper industry is being allowed to stew in its own juices. Uh, Urdu newspapers also have been suffering. You revealed out a figure by RNI that 3,000 new publications have come up and only 250 or something have applied for a closure. But this is not the exact situation. The people who report closure is around 251. But people who simply run away and without reporting their closure and just leave everything in limbo is far greater than that. So the demise rate, the death rate in the newspaper industry is now any time higher than it was in the previous years. And this is true not only for daily newspapers, it is true for even smaller publications, monthlies, weeklies, fortnightlies. And as everybody knows, the cost of production, the cost price of a newspaper is always higher than the selling price. And you have to fill up this gap by employing different ways of generating revenue. Uh, and the options available to us in this field are very, very limited. Advertising from public and public enterprises and private enterprises is not going to, I mean, come back to newspaper industry anymore because they are already migrating to different platforms like, say, electronic reporting and digital platforms. With this scenario in mind, what we have got to understand is the option available for newspaper industry is, I mean, to adopt the digital platform once again. I mean, we have been having a digital presence since last 6 and 7 years, but it was only during the lockdown that we realized that physical distribution of newspapers is becoming more and more difficult. And even after we circumvent all these difficulties, the number of people who seem to be available for readership is, I mean, dwindling. So what we have done is we have started putting more and more effort in our PDF pages and formats and distributing newspaper on the digital platform. We will start looking for the Google ads and all those things after we have established gained a very strong foothold in the field.
Okay.
That is one thing. But where the, in Bombay, if I'm speaking about Bombay, the pandemic has created a havoc with the print industry because the distribution network has collapsed like anything. With the local trains and with the local transport systems not available, the vendors who used to distribute newspapers and who used to collect from the newspaper depots, they are not able to come and collect the newspapers for distribution in their areas and in their localities. That's one of the major problems. And until the local trains and transportation systems are back in place, we don't think we'll be able to get back to our old status. That is one part of the story. The second part is that with the things becoming easier, I mean, accessing newspapers on mobiles and tabs and laptops is now easier than it was earlier. And you have a host of newspapers providing internet editions. So the competition starts there. Even in that limited space, limited digital space, you have got so many newspapers and so many digital portals who are vying for space and vying for attention. Here, what I would think that the future is that crowdfunding is the only way of holding your sway in this field. And like some other portals that they have, what they have done is, I mean, they give you an option of making donations to the newspaper, to the digital the platform, so that they can sustain their activities. And they don't stick on to one figure that you pay 1,000 rupees for a year or 2,000 rupees for a year. They just leave it to you. However much you can pay, just make a small donation, whatever you are capable of.
That's really very erratic.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's obviously, but that's the only way available to digital platforms, because you cannot persuade people to.
Let's hear what Pradip says about this, because they have tried another model.
Yes, so we have to go in for other models. And the second thing that one more thing that comes to my mind is that all the newspapers throughout the country should raise their voice and come up with some sort of specific demands with the government, because the government is dishing out 20 lakh crores and all types of those figures and everything, and not a single penny for the newspaper industry. I don't think you can look the other way if things are going in this direction. And
we'll discuss the way the government has changed its policy in many ways.
In many ways,
the Kashmir,
Kashmir is only a sort of a laboratory.
It absolutely is. Let's ask Pradip what he thinks. What do you say, Pradip, about this? What do you feel is the way it's playing out? But we'll come back, because that's an important point.
Yeah, I would totally agree that there is a paradigm shift in the business, and as Sarfaraz was also saying, there's an ad migration to the internet.
Exactly.
That and it's happening everywhere, and we've seen it. We've seen so many of the big newspapers actually in trouble. For instance, Washington Post. We thought that was one of the icons in journalism. The Pentagon paper, and so many exposes, so many big events that they commanded, and it's been sold off to a shopkeeper. That kind of thing. No, it's a great come down, and it was happening as it is. Guardian, they have already planned for closing down their print edition to go to the internet, and now they're asking for donation and all that. So they're also desperately looking for a new model, revenue model. And that is actually, I don't know how and where this can be found, but I think the ground has shifted. And so I think probably the days of the print media is over. Also the television media. And I think because the internet has taken over in such a big way. We have 4G now. When the 5G comes, I think it's going to be even worse. Because whatever you do by direct cable, you can do on the internet. So when that happens, I think it's going to change. And I was also And incidentally, I was there in Bombay because my sister lives there. So I came there and I was also speaking to some people who do films. They also have started thinking this way, that when you are thinking of a new film, you're also looking at what kind of smartphone dimension is coming up, because many other people are going to actually watch on smartphones. So that kind of thing is happening. So I think we have to be prepared for that. But we also have our own troubles, which have been always nagging and always there, as Anuradha also suggested, that it didn't begin with the COVID. It was always happening. Small newspapers, that you have your own peculiar kind of problems, that there's not enough revenue for you to be lavish, for you to be raising salaries, for you to keep up with the rest of the country, or the best newspapers where the salaries are good. That kind of thing was not happening. But in a way, there is also a consolation that this is not just the problem of the media. COVID or whatever. When COVID came, for instance, the media was in trouble, but I have also seen so many other businesses, small and medium businesses in trouble. Even big newspaper businesses must be also facing the same problem. But only recently, I think day before yesterday, I was speaking to some people in Assam who were running travel agents. They are also almost on the verge of closing down. There's nothing happening, and they don't also see a future opening up in the near. In the foreseeable future. So they were actually at a loss at what to do. And I think the same thing is happening to the media, that we are in a fix because we are also small businesses. We have to be thinking of the business. So we have to be thinking of new models. I think that's very important. And probably we'll also have to be thinking of migrating to the internet, which everybody is doing at the moment. We have also started doing that. And we are actually focusing on the internet. The only thing is we don't know where the revenue is going to come from. We can do some Google ad, but Google is only going to give us a small percentage of what they get. So it's not something that you get on your own. You're getting it as a reflection from somebody else. That is not too much. So they hold the monopoly. And that market is actually completely in their control, almost completely. So I think for newspapers to come in there and look for ads, independent ads, is going to be another kind of business that has to be coming about. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we face. And if you don't manage to do something, probably you will sink. But and that's something that I'm not saying because I don't believe in the business anymore, or I don't believe in the profession anymore. But it's a reality that we have to be facing. That if we are not able to overcome this hurdle, then I think it's quite a certain future that we are going to sink. That we can't run without money, and that money has to be had. And Sarfaraz is also suggesting this crowdfunding. No, I also believe that the small man philanthropy. We're not talking about Bill Gates to come and bail us out, but small man philanthropy, which I think the Wire is also looking for. They're asking for small donations. That I read a good news story today, free. So if I want 2 other people to read free, please give some money, and there will be some people who are willing to do that. And I think the best model for this, some of the best models I would say, because there are not just one, is Wikipedia. They are also not charging any ads, they're not carrying any ads, but they're still managing. And also it pricks on our conscience that you use Wikipedia so much when they ask for donation, you also want to give something. That is happening. I think we have to depend on that small man philanthropy, that we are bound together to a certain project, that if you're using something, if you're benefiting from something, some particular project, when that project is telling you the truth, that they don't carry ads, they don't make business elsewhere, it's only to, they're serving me, and for that service, please give me something. I think a lot will give. I think that's the optimism.
We've had these models over the last few years, especially the foundations that have funded news websites, especially like The Wire, for instance.
Yes, The Wire,
News Minute. I mean, Dhanya Rajendran was in an earlier, Dhanya Rajendran was in an earlier webinar that NWMI had, and is now launching something called a membership model. So I wanted to very quickly bring in Meera here. Meera K is, she runs something called Citizen Matters. And we have a lot of questions, and we're almost at about the last segment. Unfortunately, there's so much more that we need to cover and discuss. So can I quickly request Meera to speak a little bit about what you wanted to say, just a few points, and then let's have the discussion open up to Q&A. Meera, please.
Sure. Thanks, Geeta. So for citizen matters, we are primarily dependent on reader funding, some HNIs, and a few small grants. So it's like the expenses are so minimal that you really can't make it more efficient. And we've always been a virtual organization. We haven't spent on rent and so on. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing. And though we started as a for-profit, then pivoted into non-profit because of multiple reasons, right? The cost of journalism I think, is the biggest cost out there. And even if you have ads or any other kind of revenue model, it's still going to be hard to cover that cost, especially when you do solid journalism. So the experience from a non-profit perspective, I just want to mention a few points, like you asked. One is, it is true that these challenges are global, right? It's not just about India, that it's been there in the last few years. We've been kind of seeing this worsen, and COVID just kind of made it more stark. But specifically in India, we have like 2-3 aspects which kind of make it worse. One is the online ad model is not very mature. If you look at it, the rates, whether it's Google ad rates or any other such agency, you don't have, the returns are not really very impressive enough or sustainable enough, right? Your CPM rates are very, very low here compared to rest of the world. So unless, of course, you're in like the millions, if you're doing a lot of politics, celebrity news, maybe you're getting 30-40 million, then maybe you'll get like a significant number. And in fact, during COVID, these rates went down even more. So it's really not something that you can depend on to survive. Okay, that's one. And like I said, the niche, if you're part of, if you're covering a topic which has a very specific focus or is a niche topic, then it's going to be just harder. Number two, media cannot access FCRA. So foreign funds are a huge issue, because a lot of media, especially when they have specific focus like gender or environment or civic or citizenship, like we do, there are many good grants and funders abroad who would be interested in this kind of work, right? But unfortunately, none of us can access those. That's the second point. And the third is and the third point is about corporate funds, right? CSR funds. Now, technically, CSR funds have a guideline that sort of an indicative list that the government has given. So if you, let's say, want to do a series of articles on, let's say, environment or climate change, corporates can fund. But for some reason, this whole, perception of media being something, it's safer to avoid this, makes pretty much every corporate doesn't want to touch media, right? So CSR funds are out because of that. And of course, they don't need to, support news or politics, but even for these other kind of topics, it would be great to get some CSR support for that. And that's also another issue. Right now, yes, retail donors, we call, which are basically readers funding, giving small amounts, 500, 1,000 or whatever. That is what many small media are dependent on. And it is growing. It's not something traditionally we're known for, because people like to donate to charity, right? If you say you're educating a child or you're supporting somebody's healthcare costs, it's
generally
just,
sorry, Meera, to interrupt, but generally, traditional media, the news media that we've been seeing so far, I mean, we have Gauri Lankesh, of course, which the Lankesh Patrike just took a policy decision not to accept any ads. So leave alone CSR or corporate ads. Ads itself were a no-no for them earlier. Now, of course, they seem to have changed. So, so let me just go back to what Anuradha started with, and what I think both Pradip and Sarfaraz have talked about, which is the government's shift in advertising policy to non-media, or to downgrade media, print media in some ways, and move towards digital platforms which they control then. So the advertising model obviously is not enough. It's not sustaining. And, like Pradip pointed out, you have an economy that's seeing a huge downturn. So when you don't have these models, then what do you do? Anuradha, you want to take this up, and then I think we'll have a very quick round before we take up the questions that have come.
When you don't have,
what does one see forward?
I mean, not much. I mean, like Sarfaraz Saab said that, Kashmir is an experimental laboratory. I think at least rest of India should learn lessons from us. What has happened is, I mean, we're talking about digital platforms being an alternate model, and we've been toying with that as well. It needs lesser investment. Its outreach is good because, particularly in a place like Jammu and Kashmir, it has far-flung areas, roadless areas where the newspapers don't go, but people had smartphones. Now, for the last 1 year, the smartphones have been reduced to a piece of trash because the internet doesn't exist.
Yeah.
To respond to a situation like that, I mean, even digital, we are managing online right now. If we go in for our website right now is not very dynamic, so that's okay for us because people have a majority of people do not have access to dynamic websites because of the 2G connectivity, and majority subscribers rely on mobile internet, not on the broadband. So, but it's not, at the same time, it fetches no returns. The other thing, yes, crowdfunding is something we didn't toy with. We thought of investments. We thought of, I mean, in the case of if your investments are going, bigger investments would also in a conflict region work against you. You can always, if the state is so hell-bent on fabricating cases, and it will take a long time to prove, they can always invoke some Hawala channel or something like that. But low crowdfunding could be one of the options I think that we're looking at. The other thing that came up during the discussion I was listening to was, I mean, there's some of the things that we've already toyed with funding agencies within India or the corporate. And as Meera mentioned that, the problem with that is that, they don't want to be connected to certain kinds of media. And obviously when you carry a tag called Kashmir, nobody wants to connect with that. So that's been a huge problem. We've just been shadow boxing and trying to think of ways, and what we haven't really tried is the crowdfunding, which
yeah, I mean, and look at the experience of the Lankesh Patrike people, where Facebook has just completely shut them down.
Right.
Facebook actually is a very, very
because
powerful platform.
you also need to look at this whole state and the corporate nexus. And even social media or anywhere.
What you said about Dogri, for instance, the Dogri paper shutting down. Sarfaraz, but do you see that happening with the Urdu media? Do you see the Urdu media shutting down because it's not able to sustain? Again, your
Urdu would have a, Geeta, sorry, I'll just add before he says sorry, can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, because we have Urdu speaking population here also.
Yeah.
And Urdu is something which is much more universal across the country.
Continent, yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a regional language,
Yeah.
But do you see it under threat?
Well, we are all travelers in the same boat exactly. As I told you earlier, first of all, we thought this attitude towards Urdu newspapers clear to Urdu newspapers alone. But then we realized that it is across the board. Everybody is, suffering. The Hindi newspapers, the Marathi newspapers, the Gujarati newspapers, they are all facing the same sort of policy decision that has been taken at Ministry of Information and Broadcasting level. But what we have been
And they've
told that
always had a problem with
oh,
purpose.
yes, but then this time what has happened is that what we have been told is that all the files that are being created at the ministry are first sent to the PMO's office for clearance. And we always know that if you send in a budget of around 1 crore rupees, it will be almost halved and the files will be sent back. So who gets in and who's left out is, I mean, anybody's guess. And you don't have any control over these situations. That's why I told you that somebody should take up this issue at the Prime Minister's level itself, because you are choking not only newspapers, I mean, to everybody attached to these things. You are choking the whole both state. You are choking.
Well, there's a question for Vasu, which I think we should move to because it, it kind of connects with what we've been discussing. Do you find Google Ads sufficient to meet revenue requirements of your online production? And how viable?
No, not at all. In fact, I also want to respond to the things that other panelists have put forward. So we have also experimented with the other thing, which is a question here, that has anybody tried the cross subsidized media houses in tuning wire? And I don't know for how long they'll fund it and whether that is sustainable. So a combination of all these sources, revenue model is probably that's sustainable.
There's a question for Pradip. Yeah, sorry.
We do want to continue the newspaper also, though it's a weekly tablet, it's not like a daily thing, but based on the subscription model. And as of now, it is off the cost of masala dosa and coffee, not one full masala dosa and coffee. But we are confident that in due course, we can increase the price and also sustain ourselves. But we are sure that we cannot sell this newspaper instance in very big number, the way it was received 20 years or 30 years back.
Many of the bigger established newspapers have firewall right now. They have they just do not give access.
Yeah.
Pradip, there's a question for you. Could you please tell us more about the employee-owned model at your journal?
Actually, we just started. I was with the Imphal Free Press. Then as I told you personally, that I left because I thought I should be going to something else. In the sense that I've been in the daily newspaper for a long time, daily journalism for a long time, where you are actually doing a lot of it's a reflective kind of writing, that you have a road accident there and you're writing about the road accident. Some politician says some things and then you're writing about that thing, that you're not able to actually get deep enough. So I thought I should move on to something else, which is why I decided to go. It's not related to economy. That I decided to move for quite some time. When I was there in Shimla, I thought I was missing out on something else. As it is, I've been in this for quite some time. In '86, I started my career in Delhi and all that. But for such a long time you've been there, I thought you should change. I mean, it's time. It's not that you don't like this particular job, but there was a time for you to change, which is why I did. And so I said I'll change. But then it coincided with the crisis that we are talking about, the print media crisis, the ad depletion, and all that. So we decided to. Some of us, actually, not too many of us, but because we know that we won't be having any money in the beginning. We still don't have money, but we hopefully will start getting money. But we got together and started this, and we also depend a lot on the goodwill of people who want to write for us. So they are also happy. Many of them already have their independent incomes. They just want to express their opinion, and we're giving them a platform, especially the younger lot. And it's an experiment. So far it's succeeding. So many people want to write. So many people, short story writers, to people who want to express their opinion, they're coming into us. If we are making profit out of their writings, probably they will also start demanding something else. But right now they know that it's not. But hopefully we will be able to get some money so that we can share whatever comes in. But the model is that all of us got together and we launched this website. There's not much expenditure in launching a website. We all know that. And also there's not much overheads. We don't have to be buying newsprints and ink and all that. Only salaries are the only thing pending. And since all of us are owners, we know how much is coming in. If nothing is coming in, we don't take anything. If something is coming in, we share that. So that kind of thing we're doing at the moment. So far, we've been 6 months in this new project. So far, it's been doing well. And we have also started coming out with the print periodical. And the next edition is due on the 10th of this month, but probably we'll have to delay because there's a lockdown and this is not taken by hawkers. It's not distributed by hawkers, it's distributed at the newsstands. Because everything is stocked here. But
one thing that keeps coming up, of course, during the COVID and what Sarfaraz Arzoo also spoke of is the fact that the lockdown has completely disrupted, is a mild word, destroyed distribution for newspapers, the physical copies itself.
Yes.
Apart from the scare that people had about whether it would be transmitted through newspapers or something. We have one question from Rohini, which, any of you all could answer really. It says, would it help cost and attract readership to specialize on certain subjects, gender or environment, so become very niche in one's interests, or be hyper local rather than cover all the news? Anybody who'd like to take that question?
Well, actually, News Laundry has started working on that more probably because they'll be presenting some specific issues before the viewers and asking funds for that particular specific subject. So that they are doing, and we have also planned to do something of that sort. This is the project on which we are going to work for the next 1 month and we'll be giving you stories, and the cost is so much, and we expect our viewers to fund it. So that's the model. So we have, News Laundry is actually doing that. So we have thought about it, and probably in the next week we are doing something of that sort.
There's a question from Meera. Registering as a non-profit, does it give the benefit of giving individual donors a tax deduction benefit for their subscription, making it more attractive? So how would you answer that, Meera?
You get the 50% deduction like you would if you're registering it as a trust. You could get that, and we do have that. But the point is, the initial convincing is the harder part. Once people are convinced that this is something important they need to support, then this additional deduction is just like a icing on the cake. It's just a extra thing. But the first part is hard.
Sorry,
still hard.
Lost connect. You lost your audio.
Sorry, no, I was just. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, convincing people to donate is still hard. Once they decide to donate, then this is a nice thing that they appreciate, saying, hey, I also get a tax deduction. But they still have to give, right? So that's still will be a challenge.
Some questions for Anuradha. With the internet problems in Kashmir, your internet edition would have also suffered.
Yeah.
That I think you've already covered.
Yeah, I mentioned, but something that I didn't mention, and that's in Jammu, there was partial internet throughout the last 1 year. In Kashmir, there was no internet for the first 6 months at all. So a lot of Kashmir-based newspapers, our Srinagar edition included, the web editions were not going up. I mean, we have the same web edition, but we have a different e-paper. So those were not being uploaded for about 6 months. There were no digital newspapers at all, other than there being no digital readers. There was just not that facility available.
But how do you look at breaking this? Because there doesn't seem to be any way in which the government is responding in the slightest to shift this.
No,
I mean,
not shifting, and then Yeah, the court verdict that I got in January 10, interestingly says that, restrictions cannot be imposed for prolonged periods. Now, the court forgot to define what prolonged is. And what we've seen is that while
Very conveniently.
while the restrictions are something, whether how prolonged they are or how prolonged they are not, they are repeatedly they can be used. In May and June, there were encounters in Kashmir Valley on grounds of which internet was fully shut again, mobile phones were switched off for a couple of days in some areas, for a week, for at least a week in some areas. So, these restrictions have also in some ways become very permanent, become very repeated.
But there was one question which I had, and I mean, that is really what is crucial for all of us who are looking at independent news platforms, independent news ways of expressing ourselves independently. How do you see, the fact that your survival is so difficult? How do you see it affecting the kind of news that you think should be out there, the kind of news that you think should be uh, covered, the news gathering that should happen? Um, Anuradha, would you say? And then I'll ask Vasu and Pradip also to respond.
In our case, it's not just the funding. I mean, funding, you need funds to get good staffers for maintaining the quality, but also this whole climate of fear under which we are operating. The staffers are not very comfortable doing certain stories. There are reporters, and it's improved a little since last year, but I remember initially the first few months it was very difficult to even get our reporters based in the valley to think of story ideas, to discuss story ideas, anything. I mean, even about something related to education, something related to health, because everything at the end of the day was connected to the lockdown and to what had happened. And they would just clam up on the phone. First, there was, I mean, such little communication. One, they were talking out of that media facilitation center you've seen, which was like a chicken coop, and where you get a feeling that your work is under surveillance, you're being heard all the time, everything.
Yeah.
Other than that, the district correspondents had disappeared for a long time. They didn't even have that kind of facility available. So stories kind of, there has not been much ease in doing certain kind of stories. There is a lot of discomfort. And
Vasu, what do you think? How has
Yeah, definitely it has affected us. And when I said that we hired two more people during lockdown, it's not that we planned it then. We have planned even bigger expansion much before lockdown, and we couldn't do that. So without that kind of expansion and giving the variety of stories that we wanted to give, we unable to start the subscription model and all that, because it is, though people identify our news media house as something related with a cause, uh, just that cause is not enough to sustain. What kind of stories and quality that we can maintain is very crucial, and we are unable to go in that direction. So that is there. So there are people who can write to our website without asking for remuneration for years. Yes, that is true, but you need at least a minimum number of staff to upload those stories, apart from maintaining the regular routine things. So if we don't do that, then that's difficult, and that difficulty we are facing.
But Pradeep, you all have covered quite a lot. I mean, I've seen your website, and you all have managed to get a amount of issues that you all have covered and a lot of attention. How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I think that's a large issue again, because I think it's not just about COVID or the business model. It's about the internet. I think the internet is a bigger challenge that it has come about, and also the social media is there. And real time people are uploading news events, and so is the idea of breaking news is no longer the monopoly of the newspapers or TV channels. Passed on to the social media. So I think the bigger challenge than what just the business model, or the migration of the ads, for instance. I just must for the advertisers, it's so much more cheaper and also cost effective for them to advertise on the internet. And let me just say something about it, because it's important that when we're talking about Google ads, we do Google ads, and how much do you get? You get 60,000 maximum if you have a lot of subscribers. You get 1 lakh rupees a month, and that's not enough to run a newspaper. And Google will be getting a multiple of that. That's not enough at all. I don't think it's going to be enough, which is why the bigger newspapers, people who are already established, people who have money, are actually starting the subscription model, that you are given the opportunity to read 3 or 4 of their thing online free, and after that you're asked to subscribe. And I think that is people are actually groping for a model to actually sustain. And I think we have to join that. We have to find a way out of this, because I think the challenge is not just about the localized business model that we talking about, how the government is cutting off on our ads and all that. It's also a bigger challenge, much bigger global kind of challenge, which we have to latch on to. And I'm reminded of what King Lear says: ripeness is all. The time for a certain business, it's already been ripe. After that, you can't do much. You have to be ready for something else. And Shakespeare also says in Hamlet, readiness is all. In King Lear, he says ripeness is all. You're ripe, you're old, and then you're finished. You just can't revive that youth again. That youth was there once upon a time with our kind of business. That youth is gone. I think we have to be ready to change. And that's where we have the biggest. And I think we have to meet that. Unless we meet that, as I was saying in the beginning, we will have to sink. There's no other way. That nobody's going to wait for us. And global environment is not going to change just because we are suffering. I mean, then nobody cares about that. So I think we have to actually come out of that and look for a way to do it. Maybe subscription model. If you build up a brand and then ask people to subscribe to read, give them free, as so many other newspapers are doing. Hindu is doing that. You read 1, 2, and the third time you want to.
I think Pradip I'm just not able to hear him. But in the meantime, Sarfaraz, if you could answer the questions that have come to you. Have you had to lay off staff? And the second question is, have you managed to find younger readers in the digital format? Readers in
yes, the first answer to the first question is that no, we haven't laid off any staff. In fact, we have supported them to all these days. And as far as the digital platform is concerned, yes, we think we have found readers. We have devised certain ways to attract new readers, and I think the system is working fine. What we have done is that we know that the younger generation is very energetic, and their attention span is very little. So we have devised news items and articles in such a way that you can finish them off in a minute or two. So that makes it. I mean, if you have the remote in your hand, you are obviously going to change the uh, 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 platform. I mean, change the thing that you are viewing. What we have done is that we have taken away that remote from them, and instead of they moving in from one channel to another, we provide them with an answer to look at whatever they are looking for. So I think understanding the psychology of the younger generation, and considering the fact that they are all in a people in a hurry, we have devised ways where we can provide them with answers in a hurry too. And I think that has paid off well, and we have we are getting newer readers, younger readers, and obviously we have never imagined that the digital media, the digital platform would provide us with such a huge audience. Print media was restricted in all the ways that you can think of, but the digital media is something that brings you readers from USA, from Saudi Arabia, from Canada, from uh, all over the world. Name the place, and we have readers there. So that has helped us in expanding our readership, and I think that is an answer to our future problems also. We surely are going to someday or the other going to monetize this uh, plus point, and I think that will surely help us in seeing through the uh, bad days that are lying ahead for the print media.
Okay, so that's a fabulous note of hope. Anuradha, there are two questions for you. There are three actually, but I think two can be sort of compressed together. Questions were, how did people get the news? And I think this is during the entire shutdown. Similar question, how did you get news information with so much of closures? And what is the present state after 1 year of the application of Article 370?
Yeah, it's been an immense challenge, getting news with minimal staff, with communication lockdown, and I don't know. We were just shadow boxing, and we were trying. I remember last year when things happened, I couldn't hear anything. I mean, from the valley, where you always get so much information, and it automatically starts pouring in. People start sending in. There is a constant interaction, even with the officials, with the people. So, it's things used to work very automatically. But thereafter, I mean, it had been a huge challenge. Unlike other, these big newspapers were sending their teams into Srinagar, getting stories done from Delhi or Bombay or the bigger media I'm talking about. And we didn't have that kind of resources to send somebody from Jammu and, make him camp or make him or her camp there. So we started picking up what was appearing in a lot of national media in the beginning, using that as source. We started looking up, scanning the social media of people who had traveled from Kashmir outside, and trying to pick up their voices, trying to, investigate that further, whatever little we could do. But the quality has really come down. As of today, it's difficult to approach people. People are scared to talk. It is absolutely impossible to get, have some access to officials if you want to authenticate your story, whatever you've heard. The officials just don't respond, either out of arrogance or either out of the spell of fear that also applies to them. But we've sort of eventually we've sort of compromised on the quality because there is no way out.
There's a question for Vasu. What is the overall situation of newspaper employees including journalists in Karnataka?
Yeah, actually it's quite bad, and institutions like Prajavani, Deccan Herald, or even Hindu have laid off, and some news channels have removed journalists and other staff, and some people have cut the salaries. So that's the overall situation. The overall situation in the so-called bigger media houses is quite bad. So that is one. And there is another question here. And is it possible to crowdsource the content? Is it feasible to crowdsource the content? Actually, our media house is sustaining mainly because of that. The last 1.5 years, the number of writers who have written to us, in fact, without taking any honorarium, is about 350. So 350 people have written to our magazine and also our website so far. So that's feasible for us. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That actually brings us to the last question, which is excellent. I mean, I would really request all of you to look at the chat window. It's quite a long question, so I think it's more of a comment, and it's a lot of it kind of links up with a lot of what I also wanted to ask in terms of and hope also that there is some kind of networking that can emerge from independent media ventures across the country. I mean, whether it is in Jammu or in Mumbai, like yours, or Bengaluru or anywhere else, to create some sort of a network of sharing and collaboration. That's the you know this person, the question is, I just want to know more from the organizers if all of you have ever thought of networking amongst yourselves instead of fighting these battles singly, instead of all these solitary struggles. Uh, it would be wonderful if we could do something like that. But there's one last question that I had before we bring this to an end, and this is to all of our panelists. What is it that keeps motivating you to go, to continue to strive, and to keep trying to seek survival? Who would like to? Yeah, Sarfaraz?
Yes, I
What
think
is it that keeps you?
it's the missionary zeal that keeps us active. Uh, Urdu has a tradition of, I mean, from Maulana Azad to Hashrat Mohani and Maulvi Muhammad Baqir, who was the first martyr in the uh, after the first war of independence in 1857. So there is some sort of a sense of belonging and the feeling that you owe it to the society, you owe it to your community, you owe it to your readership to get them the best of journalistic efforts that are available and that are at your disposal. And although commercialization has stepped in a lot, but even today, Urdu newspapers as a uh, whole group, they still cater to the community, to the Urdu knowing community. And I think Urdu knowing community does not, I mean, restrict itself to Muslims alone. But yes, well, the major share of readership is Muslim, no doubt. But the Urdu community, Urdu journalism has always been very secular, upholding the traditions of democracy, of secularism. And as I told you earlier, there's a sense of being a missionary. You are not here just for the sake of money. You are not here just for the sake of business. You are here to serve the people. And that's the prime responsibility that we think we have.
Pradip?
Yeah, actually, my internet is not very stable, which is why I keep going out. But well, I think it's that basic need to communicate, that you have to. I mean, I think it's an innate desire for you to actually portray the scenario, whatever scenario, wherever you are, as you see it. Because you don't want to keep taking the opinion of others. You also want to express your opinion. I think that's the drive behind many of people, all of us journalists, as well as people wanting the news from the journalists.
Vasu, if you could
actually,
tell us.
I think this challenge is not before journalism only. The challenge is before the democracy, and the threat is for the idea of India. So we are all activists, and we think that no organization, no movement can now be successful without a proper communication and messaging mechanism. And media is a very important tool. So, sort of collaboration between the people's movements and the media is very much essential. And we think that's what I mean. Our passion towards social change that drives us in this.
Anuradha, you've had the most difficult time the last few years, especially.
Yeah, I'll say two reasons that keep us going. One is our very strong belief that free media is very important for the health of democracy, and that it is important to keep up the information, whatever little that we have, keep it going, keep telling truth. I mean, our editorial pages are one of the strongest. And the other is that even in the most dismal and despairing situation, we are the crazy optimists. Yeah, we do hope for something. I was thinking of, I mean, you have a person who's kind of virtually on, he's fighting a deadly maybe disease, and he's put on the ventilator. He's put on the ventilator not because it's his last moments. He's put on the ventilator because there is a hope that he may revive. So right now we are on the ventilator and we hope to revive.
Oh, that's absolutely the most important thing, because I think all of us have really brought this together also because we do believe this is so important, is so essential for a democracy, for freedom of expression, for the freedom of the press. I think we are almost at the end of our session, but there is a hope that we will continue these conversations, and we will continue to try and bring people who are these voices, independent or otherwise, in across the country together. I just, before we end, I'd like to thank all the people from the NWMI who've been working very hard behind the scenes. There's Durga here and Raksha, who have opened their DMs and brought in this initiative where they got a lot of young people who were in danger of losing their jobs, talking to them. There is Jagriti here and Aishwarya, there's Lakshmi, Amu. Thanks a lot, all of you, Supriya, all of you. There are a number of people who have been absolutely wonderful in this. And thank you all for being here. Thank you all for this discussion. There's a lot that we need to still take back and a lot that we still need to work on. We don't have all the answers, obviously. Depending on the digital, which is the move that we are seeing, is very precarious. We've had breakdowns in communication even in the course of this last 1.5, 2 hours. So let's see where we go, and let's hope that. Thank you, Vasanthi, for your in translations, and you didn't need to do much, but I'm glad that you participated in.
No, I would in fact
Yes.
like to add to NWMI's voice of thanking all our speakers, because and what Anuradha ended this thing with about the ventilator metaphor. I think it's such an injection of hope. Thank you, each one of you, and of course the internal NWMI team makes us so proud to be a part of it.
Really been wonderful. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for this, and let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you.